Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship, New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we are in the hold of the Civil War era sloop of war USS Constellation. This is where I started my career on museum ships some 14 years ago. Not in the hold, I was up on deck, but on this ship. The Curatorial and Education Department for the Battleship is currently on the road. We are supporting historic ships in Baltimore as they dry dock their Coast Guard high endurance cutter number 37, former USCGC Taney. And while we were here to help out there, we also were filming some videos on Constellation. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the armor of a ship like this. Constellation is the last all-sail ship built for the Navy, and her career spanned 1855 all the way up until 1955. So she saw the evolution from wooden-hauled vessels like herself to armor plating to eventually steel-hauled vessels like Battleship New Jersey, which was in commission while Constellation was still in the Navy, believe it or not. So, for an old wooden-hauled vessel like this, thickness of wood and type of wood are what are important. We are down in the hold because here you can see the framing. And Constellation is very unique in that probably north of 40% of her, most of the ship below the waterline, is original, as you can tell from these frames. These frames are made out of live oak, which only grows off the coast of Georgia, on some of those islands. They are, it is an extremely tough wood to work with. It's also an extremely good armor plating. U.S. Navy ships from the first Constellation and, of course, Constitution, built in the late 1790s, were built out of live oak, and it continued to be a tradition among wooden-hauled sailing ships in the Navy. So not only were the frames made of that super hard material, live oak is in fact so dense that it does not float. The frames are spaced much closer together. Look at how narrow the gap is between these frames. They're not just structural, they're also a big part of the armor. Constellation is armed with 8-inch guns, and the frame spacing is less than 8 inches, so if another similarly armed ship fires at her, their projectile is going to hit that live oak. Outside of the live oak here below the waterline is 4 inches of, as designed, other types of oak. And then you can see as you go up above the waterline that there is another 4 inches on the inside, and it gets even thicker, as much as 21 inches in some place. So these layers of wood are what are resisting the shot of projectiles. And it's very similar to Constitution, which famously got the nickname Old Ironsides for being able to bounce British 18-pound cannonballs off of her hull. So American ships continue to be built like that all the way up through Constellation's day. However, the artillery began to outpace this type of armor. And so by the Civil War era, you had rifled guns which could arc and land on the deck of a ship, unlike typical smoothbore guns that you're firing into a ship point-blank range broadside. So now you've got to go from having an unarmored deck to armoring that. And you have shell-firing guns. And the shells do infinitely more damage to a wooden ship than solid shot. The explosion rips a big jagged hole in the side of the ship instead of punching a 6 or 8 inch round hole that can be easily plugged and patched later. And it also creates a lot of splinters that will kill your tightly packed crew. A ship like Constellation would have, she's rated for 319 sailors and Marines. So on a ship that's just 179 feet long on deck. By the time Constellation was serving in the Civil War, more modern vessels were being built with actual wrought iron plates bolted onto a wood backing. A little bit later on, while Constellation was serving as a training ship, early types of nickel steel steel alloys were being used as armor plate, and they often had a wood backing. Oftentimes that wood backing was teak, such as the battleship's deck. That teak is bad on a wooden ship like this because it is an oily, dirty wood. If it splinters from being hit with a cannonball and those splinters hit crew, it becomes infected and kills them. Much less the case with the white oak that our hull is made out of. It's a much drier wood. However, as the backing on steel armor plate, that it doesn't splinter quite as much. And so that was used for a generation of pre-dreadnought type battleships. And eventually you get Krupp armor plating, which is another steel alloy, which renders wood backing completely unnecessary by the 1890s, early 1900s. And Battleship New Jersey's special treatment steel and Class A and Class B armor plating is just an evolution beyond that. Constellation doesn't use iron armor at all, but she does have iron on board as ballast. Earlier ships would use stone, but by the Civil War era, there was enough iron manufacturing in this country that it was just easier to use it as ballast than to get stone. The iron chosen for ballast is known as pig iron. It's more of a byproduct of the process. It's not good enough to use to manufacture guns or railroad tracks or boilers. And so it's cheap and easy to use. This is much of Constellation's original ballast, which has been on board for the entire career of the ship, both her active duty Navy career and as a museum. And it's not necessarily where it always was. Notice that the ballast blocks have holes in them. Thank you. And that is so that as we're loading cargo down here, this is where all of the storage for the ship would be. The ship was able to stay at sea for 6 months at a time without replenishing, which doesn't need fuel, so it's just carrying food and desiccated food and water in big tanks. And she would sail on deployment away from the United States for up to 3 years at a time. So all of the supplies like spare clothes and that sort of stuff that doesn't tend to get replenished underway would be stored down here. Anyway, as that stuff is being loaded, the balance of the ship is being thrown off, and so you can move the ballast blocks using hooks like these. You get 2 guys, 1 hook on each side. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions about the stuff we talked about today, leave them in the comments section down below. If you would like to support historic ships in Baltimore and the various ships in their collection, including the Coast Guard cutter Taney, which is about to go into dry dock, there's a link in the description that will take you to their donate page. If you would like to support the Battleship New Jersey and our YouTube channel in particular, there is also a link to the GoFundMe campaign that we have. We've raised enough money on that we're able to now travel and visit other ships like this one, an ancient forebearer of the battleship. As always, remember to like, share, and subscribe. We are trying to put out new content, several pieces of content every week. So if you want notifications on when that happens, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.